And our final panelist is Graham Watts, Senior Management Analyst for the City of Thousand Oaks. Graham has been employed by the City of Thousand Oaks for 10 years. In his present position, Graham coordinates hazardous and solid waste programs, along with many others. In addition to these programs, Graham has extensive experience in coordinating grants from various state agencies and is now on the board of directors of the California Resource Recovery Association. During Graham's tenure with the City of Thousand Oaks, the city has received numerous awards for its waste reduction and recycling programs and is in full compliance with AB 939 goals. Thanks for being here, Graham.
Thank you, and good morning. Let me first begin by saying I apologize for lack of some overheads. We did have some technical problems, so if you'd like the overheads, I can certainly make those available to you at a later date. Let me first start by saying Thousand Oaks is in Ventura County, about 40 miles northwest of Los Angeles County. We have a community of one-third of the community is designated as open space, so we have a substantial amount of yard trimmings and yard waste area to deal with a population in excess of 115,000 people. And we have our overall space covers about 56 square miles. The community itself is made up of approximately 40,000 households, which combines multifamily and mobile home complexes. We have about 1,200 businesses. Our median household income is $75,000, which is higher than the norm throughout the community. And so you'd say you'd have what we'd consider a disposable income community that is also quite conservative with some of its programs and services. Some of our major accomplishments, as the video explained, is a diversion rate of in excess of 58% based on the Waste Board's methodology. We have a variety of recycling programs for residents and businesses, and we do a lot of work on county-wide basis of regional programs. Those include hazardous waste collection, environmental business symposiums, market exchange, materials exchange programs very similar to VCMAX. Very similar to CalMax. We've developed VCMAX. Deconstruction type facilities, awards programs. We also do a lot of project conditioning so that at the very early stage, as projects come into the city, they are initially asked to develop recycling plans as well as space allocation for some of the trash recycling needs. Other accomplishments within the awards arena include recognition from air quality districts for some of our efforts to reduce emissions. We've done extensive work with composting, media outreach, as I said, business mixers, working directly with the chambers and working hand in hand toward their primary objective, which is reduce cost. The bottom line, really in a real world, is the main objective of a business. Certainly environmental efforts continue to support that, but through the chamber, both regionally and locally, we've been able to effectively achieve both objectives. Within our residential program, we currently have an exclusive franchise with two disposal companies. GI Rubbish USA Waste operates 80% of our residential sector. Harrison Industries, 20% of our residential sector. We use a 3-cart system where we have commingled recyclables collected in automated carts at 64 gallons, yard trimmings at 96 gallons, and trash at 64 gallons. However, it's important to note that that would be the basic service. We also have the ability to upgrade to larger or smaller carts. We also have a minimum service level of 34 gallons for what we consider a super recycler or minimum level of trash service for some of our lower waste generators, which we certainly enjoy. The recyclables collected in the program, as we've heard before, I was interested to hear how the other plastics were accepted. We are limited right now in Thousand Oaks to plastics 1 and 2. Would love to see that expand. We're accepting paper, metals, glass, paint, empty aerosol cans, and opened junk mail as well. Other areas we'd like to see added perhaps in the future would be textiles. We're even looking at the addition of computer modules being added to the program at some point. Currently the program recovers 50 to 60% of its material, and since having implemented a automated service and the most recent program improvements, we've seen our recyclables volume continue to increase. Within the commercial program, we operate one exclusive franchise, that is through GI Rubbish. They operate a exclusive program where they provide businesses with the same type of services provided to residential services, with an increased emphasis placed on metals. An important element of that is to make sure the substantial amount of diversion is provided. There is an incentive built into the contract for the company to recover at least 30% of the commercial waste stream. We also emphasize, again, some of the other regional programs with VC Max, which is our materials exchange program. Often we find that the major focus of programs is on the residential sector, and for us it certainly was. Now we're pushing as hard as we can toward the business sector and providing the same services that we've traditionally provided to the residential sector. We've also put in place a hazardous waste program, small business hazardous waste program, where historically small businesses with toxic materials have not been inclined to contact government for assistance, but we are now here to help, as you might say, and we are providing small business assistance both technically and in terms of material collection on a quarterly basis within our program, which complements our residential program. Program improvements. As I mentioned, the residential program did go to an automated variable rate system. We've been able to reduce our capacity from 180 gallons to 64 gallons. And when I say that, for 20 years, the City of Thousand Oaks operated on customer-provided containers, where on the average 4 or 5 containers will be placed out, sometimes up to 10 containers will be placed out. And we suffered, our hauler suffered, by providing too much customer service. We were collecting whatever was in the curb. It took a lot of effort and a lot of education, but we were able to educate and inform our public of the incentives of going with a variable can rate system based on the amount placed at the curb each week. And that has allowed us to really reduce the amount placed at the curb and to reward those that generate less and to offer incentives to those that generate more to kind of be in line. Another part of that is to acknowledge those true low waste generators, and that's our super recycler program. We have about 2% of our community actually has one 34-gallon cart of trash each week, in addition to the recyclables, and we're really proud of their assistance. Other key parts of the program include a rollout service for the elderly that cannot move these carts. We do provide that service through our contract hauler. We have extra bulky item service. We also have neighborhood and appearance type incentives within each homeowner association to improve the appearance of their neighborhoods with different types of systems. An important part of the overall program, of course, is the fact that whatever services are provided, we have strong performance standards built into our contract that should there be a customer concern that not be addressed within a reasonable time frame, they suffer some penalties that we can certainly implement. Some program improvements. Adding yard trimmings to our program was significant. We tried an attempt to reduce the vehicle emissions for our trash trucks, as well as provide extra incentives to recycle more by going with alternate week collection between yard trimmings and recyclables. That was an extensive effort to do that, and within a conservative community, that was a challenge for us to implement. The decision makers were supportive, and we went forward, but our community was more inclined to go back to weekly service for their yard trimming. So rather than actually provide recycling service every week, we now provide recycling service for the cart every other week, with yard trimmings collected and trash collected every week. Now what that does for us is provides an incentive for the resident to recycle more within a 64 or 96 gallon cart, depending on their needs, while also utilizing the yard trimming service and trash service. Historically, we found that in the previous program, carts that were placed out were on a weekly basis were less than half full, and you had trucks driving through neighborhoods looking for recyclables, wasting energy, gas, and certainly creating pollution. I don't know if you had a trash truck come across your neighborhood at 7 o'clock in the morning with nothing to do, but now they have something to do, and we provide that incentive, and that recyclables collection volume has increased as a result. We also have the ability to have extra recyclables collected, and nothing is really thrown away. So if a resident has extra, it's not something they have to place in their cart. We have other measures in place that will accommodate their needs. The flexibility of the program is very important, and as a result, we've seen a very change in different habits on the amount of material collected. But we've also seen the subscription levels increase, where previously we had customer service provided containers. Now these are automated containers. It's very easy to track down or work with communities or sections of the neighborhood that are not subscribing to service. And we have actually seen very little illegal disposal. We've seen increased recycling and greater awareness. It's been a very pleasing result to our program. Other sections within the commercial program I'd like to just chat on very quickly has to do with the recycling program of bins. The recycling bins are provided as part of the trash service, but they're provided at 30% of the trash bin cost. So we provide some incentive. We weren't comfortable with just providing recycling bins at no cost, because there is a cost involved, as any business would understand. And so we've seen a good response to that. We also have incentives built in for the customer as well as the hauler to achieve recycling levels that achieve both levels, both interests at the same time. In addition to the commercial program permanent service, we also have non-exclusive service. So we have 7 permitted non-exclusive companies that provide temporary and permanent service for our business and construction and demolition needs, with additional incentives built into that as well. Some of the more interesting programs within the residential sector have to do with a computer recycling program we recently completed, where we collected 20,000 pounds of computer terminals, TVs, a variety of different electronic equipment. It was really of minimal cost to the city. The processing was of no cost, and the exposure to the program and the need to address this difficult, hard-to-handle item of the waste stream was unique to Ventura County, and we hope to build upon that and perhaps go in toward the curbside section of things. Some of the savings we've also generated through our contract negotiations and some of our more effective programs, we've now been able to put into place a neighborhood enhancement program where we are now providing grants back to neighborhoods, back to homeowner associations. So the savings that we've recovered through effective programs and successful negotiations, the funds are not sitting in an account. They're now going back to the community, and we're seeing neighborhoods improved and cleaned up, and schools and everything being really enhanced by the benefit of a strong program. We've also been able to work with Air Quality District to address the pollution of electric. Gasoline mowers are now being replaced with electric mowers, electric mulching mowers. So on the average, about 50 each year are being made available to residents to, at a low cost, to exchange their gasoline-powered mower for an electric-powered mower, and that's been very successful. And that's an example of working with another agency, not specifically solid waste. In addition to that, certainly public education is a huge part of our program. It's an ongoing effort. In fact, a recent addition to our program is now that we're dealing more and more electronically with our residents through email, as well as making appointments through our hazardous waste program through email. In addition to the videos and the citywide mailers, we've also got billing statements, of course, and we have 4 newsletters a year sent out, 2 by the city and 2 by each of the trash companies. It's an ongoing effort and a significant part of our success. In addition to that, some more interesting programs we've had in place for a long time has to do with our procurement policy. As you heard, the city itself has been a strong advocate of practicing what we preach. So you'll see that at our city we do make an extra incentive to acquire and use recycled paper whenever possible, the highest post-consumer content we can. We have high use of plastic lumber with our wheel stops within our parking garages. We've made them available in terms of information to businesses, conditioning projects to use plastic lumber for some of their fencing and patio needs. We've also done a lot of work with refined motor oil. Our haulers are using refined motor oil. Our entire fleet is operated on the refined motor oil, and it's really an issue that hasn't received a lot of attention, but it's another important element to really practicing what you preach. And as we heard earlier, rubberized asphalt is a major part of our program. For the last 10 years, the city has been supporting the use of rubberized asphalt. In excess of 130 miles of road in Thousand Oaks are now paved with rubberized asphalt using in excess of 1 million tires. It's certainly a hot issue for everyone, and we're just attempting to do our part to support the market. Just a real brief touch on the rates. Our residential rates are about $19.62 per month. The super recycle rates at $15.42 per month, and certainly that will vary in terms of comparison within each community depending on where you are. Our basic commercial bin service runs about $102 per month, and we also, like I said, we have 30% and some reductions in cost based on participation. Funding. Our program is funded through franchise fees. We have a solid waste management fee that covers, it's 60 cents per household per month. We also collect 8.25% of gross revenues for the commercial sector and 13.25% of the gross revenues from the temporary bin commercial sector. In addition to that, there's a 5% of the franchise fee basically is 5% of gross revenues. In terms of duplicating or replicating what we've been able to achieve, certainly learning from other communities is the best way. We've been able to work in ways of allowing new programs to be implemented in phases, one step at a time. In a conservative community, you need to do that one step at a time. Don't try and do it all at once. We maintain flexibility in program services. We be sure to recognize that programs are going to happen over time. And the variable rate structure has been phenomenal in terms of our incentives in making the program operate on a succinct level. And let me just sum up by saying what's next for Thousand Oaks. Construction and demolition debris. I've certainly learned a lot already today, and that's one area we need to work further on. Food waste collection is our next step, and certainly regional tire collection programs is a statewide problem that we hope to address. We're also looking at GIS program tracking so that we can find out where our users and customers are coming from, how often and why. And certainly our challenge is to go beyond 50% and implement other programs that deal with other sectors of the environment, such as air, land, and water. And with that, take it back to you.
All right, thank you, Graham. With those presentations wonderful, our panelists are so knowledgeable, and it is great to see progressive local governments that have truly embraced the spirit of diversion. Well, now it is your turn again to ask questions. Remember, we have several ways you can contact us with your questions. You can call in toll-free at 1-800-497-1845. You can send a fax to area code 408-864-5412, or send an email to recycleby50@hotmail.com. As we stated before, when you contact us, please give us your first name, the location you are calling from, and state your question as simply as you can. Well, we had a few emails that have come in while you guys were giving your presentations. The first one comes from Tom in Glendale. He asked Harold, how did changing Riverside's base year affect your diversion rate?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that again?
How did changing Riverside's base year affect your diversion rate?
Actually, we never changed our base year. We actually went through and we stuck with our original numbers from 1990. And one of the key aspects in our overall program was that we petitioned and applied for the inert credit program through the Waste Board and received a 75,000 ton a year credit from the Integrated Waste Management Board. So in 1995, we actually started out with a 52% diversion when we reported our first annual report to the Waste Board.
Did any other communities change your base years, and did that have an effect?
Same county did in the three jurisdictions changed the base year from 1990 to 1998. What we detected were some major problems in the original base year generation study. For instance, indicated there were no appliances that were disposed of, and various other problems with it. There's a lot of missing information. In order to change the base year, we included information from the waste assessments. There was a private landfill that was operated in the early 1990s that had closed. There was no information in the original base year regarding that, and some other fairly significant items, but basically took us from a negative 19% diversion to our 43%.
Okay, very good. We have another question. This one comes from Mark in Sacramento. He writes, is there a future for recycling demolition drywall? What about contaminants? Anybody on the panel want to tackle that one first? Ken?
We've done some research on gypsum or drywall, and we found that it is actually a valuable farming or agricultural component for farming. So we've been doing some preliminary research, some planning on that. We don't have a program in place yet, but we do see it as a valuable. And as far as contaminants go, certainly we're going to have to provide an economic incentive for the major contaminants to be taken out, but the process would be a grinding step with a magnet to pull out metal, and then a screening step to create a product that could be used by the agricultural community. At this point, we're in the planning stages. It is a couple percent of the waste stream, and it is a valuable resource, so we look to diverting that in the future.
Very good. Anybody else want to chime in on that one?
I think there's several programs that in existence already. I believe Zanker Resources does it right now, so they can contact them for that kind of information also.
Okay, and that's in San Jose. We have a call on the line from Santa Cruz. Hi, can you tell us your name and your question?
Yes, my name is Rose.
Oh, I should let you know that you want to turn down your audio because we're getting some feedback.
My name is Rose, and I'm calling from the county of Santa Cruz, and I was hoping that the city of Riverside would elaborate a little bit on their tonnage tracking system, on how that works.
Rose, I'm sorry, we had trouble hearing you. We're getting some feedback from your audio. Could you turn down your program there and restate your question?
It's been turned down.
It's turned down, okay. I guess the feedback's our problem. Go ahead and repeat your question if you would.
I was hoping the city of Riverside could elaborate on their tonnage tracking system and how that works.
Did you get that, Harold?
Sure.
Could you elaborate on that?
One of the things that we all had to contend with as cities and counties was that we needed to actually start tracking our waste and find out what material came from what particular area. So one of the things we did was through our local task force, which was established in AB 939, that every city and county must have a local task force. We worked with the county waste management department, who operated all our landfills, and developed, along with cooperation from the haulers, developed a tonnage tracking system that allowed us to track where the material was coming from, in terms of which days, and in terms of, so right now, I'm actually able to determine the amount of tonnage coming from a certain section of the city based upon the days that it's collected. I'm also able to, we have 4 haulers within the city of Riverside. I'm actually able to go to our database and determine if hauler A is producing what amount, B, C, and D. And so I'm able to determine what areas I really need to focus in on and improve on in terms of recycling and where the material is coming from. So it's an issue that every community in the state had to deal with in terms of, after the passage of AB 939, is just where's the waste coming from and whose waste is it?
Very good. Rose, I hope we got your question answered, and thank you for calling in. This next question comes from Dave in Sacramento. And Ken, it's addressed to you. How did you first get started working together as a region? Did you start by forming a JPA?
Well, no, actually, in Sonoma County, the various cities had been working together informally for a number of years on a number of issues, and when AB 939 was passed, they got together and they said, well, how are we going to work on this? So there was already an existing informal group of managers that was working together, and they continued to work together for a number of years, crafting an agreement that everybody could be comfortable with. And so the JPA actually came after many years of cooperative working together, so it wasn't, you don't need to do the administrative paperwork of a JPA to do some of the regional programs.
Yes, go ahead, Hal.
One of the key aspects of AB 939 was that it required cities and counties for the first time to really have to look at issues of regional concern. For example, when every city and county produced their source reduction and recycling element, we had to pass that document on to our neighbors, and they had to look at it, and they had to review and comment on it. And then we had to take those particular items and do an assessment. And it turned out, actually from those SRVs, cities understood they were kind of doing the same programs, and I think that's how regional cooperation would develop and JPAs.
Okay, good. We have a question from Catherine at the Pebble Beach Community Services District. It's for you, Bob. She wants to know what markets are available for plastics 3 through 7 that you are collecting.
Well, the marketing of recyclables is basically the responsibility of the contractor, and I'm not exactly sure where they are selling those 3 through 7. I know that I have a list at work on my desk that of companies in Los Angeles that put all plastics into flower pots, for instance. They're contacting people as far north as Tama County for plastics. So The market is there, you just have to look for it, and I wish I could be more specific on that. CalMax and also the Waste Board information should help you also.
I just wanted to add that it's definitely a challenge in dealing with those plastics in Thousand Oaks. We have 1 and 2 because we cannot find a cost-effective market for our materials. And that has been a problem, where in neighboring communities they are able to take other types of plastics, but it certainly is a challenge, and the markets are there, but they're not always cost-effective, and until that happens, we're not going to be able to expand our demand and use of products from plastic.
And Graham, we have another question for you. This one is, are there environmental grants programs available to help fund some of the programs that you were talking about?
Well, in addition to the grants offered through the Waste Board for oil and hazardous waste, the Department of Conservation, there's a variety of other funding sources through the Pollution Prevention Roundtable, the EPA, not to mention the Energy Commission, and that's an important part because trash trucks need CNG or LNG, and in order to do that, you need funding support, and funding support can be provided through your local air district or through the Energy Commission, and there are certainly other national grants, so there's a variety of grant funding available, but don't limit yourself to solid waste.
Okay, Harold, this one's for you. It's from Paula in San Jose. She asks, we have a very diverse community. How do you recommend we reach out to all of our residents to increase recycling?
Well, I think it's a key point to that is that you recognize that your community is so diverse. One of the things that we're able to do is our community in Riverside is kind of defined by neighborhoods. It was interesting when I first started working for the city of Riverside, someone would call in and say, I'm from the Orange Crest area. And I'm thinking, I work for Riverside, but the community is so well defined in terms of having individual identities, and I think that San Jose has that certain sector also, that you could target programs based upon the community's needs. For example, you could develop we have a book we call Think Twice that it has all the information that you would want on recycling in the city of Riverside. Now, if you have a community that is bilingual in a certain area, you would send that information out into that particular area. Certainly sending out public service announcements that's multilingual, that's also helpful. But really, in terms of knowing your community and knowing and going back to the existing resources that you have in terms of utilizing what's already in place. There are church organizations, there are school organizations, there are community groups, and that's where we really have to kind of hone in our efforts and utilize our existing infrastructure to really make these programs work.